Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Excellent. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here with these two great Lancastrian musicians, two great knights of the British musical world who, both have carved huge reputations for themselves, if you like, on the opera stage. One as a singer and one as a composer of operas. Now, you've heard from John the last two events, most notably yesterday, on Wednesday, hearing about the role for which perhaps he's best known, the role of Wotan in Wagner. But certainly, to my mind, the vision in my mind of the Green Knight and the Minotaur, two roles that he created in Harry's operas, are equally among his great achievements. Harry's work, you may know, burst onto the opera stage with Punch and Judy, which we might talk a little bit about in a minute, because that was the point where the two of them first came together, followed by extraordinary achievements, The Mask of Orpheus, Jan Tantedera, Gawain, of course, Second Mrs. Kong, Minotaur, and many other smaller-scale pieces for the stage. Now, today we are going to focus primarily, as you know, on the Minotaur, but we're going to lead our way to that, possibly through Wotan, first of all, and certainly via Gawain. We're going to see some filmed excerpts from Minotaur, and we're also going to hear some live singing, which is a treat for us. Not bed singing, but live singing. But I just thought we might begin, given that the two of you grew up on adjacent stops on the railway line, Oswald-Twistle and Accrington. Indeed, I believe you might have both been born in the same building. Is that true? Not at the same time, obviously.
Roughly maternity home.
Roughly maternity home.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, actually, of a name like Fawlty Towers, doesn't it? A maternity home called Roughly. Very Lancashire, I would say. But I didn't realise all this until, the 70s or something, that all of this are common roots, because there's about a 12-year difference of age, I think. But I remember Harrison's Builders on Union Road, Oswald-Twistle.
That was my mother.
That was your mother's side of the family.
She wasn't the builder. No.
I don't know whether... the funny thing is, I don't know whether I'm called Harry or Harrison, because I was christened Harry, but I was registered as Harrison. So
I'm afraid I can't help you.
No, I can't help that. But it's become a popular name, hasn't it?
I'd just be interested to hear the two of you reflect just for a moment. What those, as it were, common Lancashire roots mean to you, and whether you feel that you've carried, what we might loosely call a northern sensibility with you through your work in various ways. Do you think that common heritage in, as it were, the industrial north, or between the industrial and the rural, that kind of local music making that's very strong up there, how did that form the two of you, and how do you think that continues to form what you do?
Like all things, like inspiration, is that you can't have it. If you wait for inspiration, you don't do it. And if you are... have the roots that are going to be characteristic within your background, you cannot be self-conscious about it. I can't sit down and write Accrington music, and everything is quite like that. You can't also do better. It would be a ridiculous thing if you did something and you couldn't do better. You don't have any control really in the end about how you do things.
How do you feel about your musical
if I could, there's a good thing. I'll just mention it. I have the reputation in Europe, not in England, as being an English composer. Oh, it's very English, your music. It's all the time. Well, if there's one thing I've tried not to do, is to write English music. This is a very self-conscious thing. And so if there is something English in what I do, it's in me somehow, but it's not self-conscious.
So let alone Lancashire, or let alone Accrington music.
Yeah.
Yes. But I remember now that I realised the connection about Rough Lee and everything when we were both being given a decanter each by the Mayor of Accrington after a Gawain performance. And all these this sort of common heritage came out, although, of course, I knew that Harry was basically an Accrington man. But for me, Lancashire was very important in the sense that I was surrounded by music, amateur music making, strictly amateur. My extended family of 30 people in Oswaldtwistle were conductors of the male voice choir, baritones, tenors, sopranos, piano players, organists, and so on and so forth. And so that's why I'm a singer, because I was the youngest of 5 children and I was surrounded by singing. So singing was very much a natural thing.
So can you remember when the two of you first met? When did you first hear John singing? When did you first hear Harry's music?
He did Punch and Judy.
Yes. I remember very well, we were rehearsing.
But you didn't do it in Aldborough, though, did you?
I just did the recording.
You did the recording, that's right.
Probably 76 or something, mid-70s. Yeah. David Atherton was conducting it, and we were rehearsing in London, and Harry came to listen. And I remember very specifically, actually, that your comment was about text. And it's one of my hobby horses, text. It's not just clear diction, but words and text being a part of the music, and text being something you can almost chew on, and consonants that you sing, and the variety of vowel sounds in a vocal line, which no instrument has. No orchestral instrument has. That's one advantage of the human voice, as well as the communicative things. And you were absolutely talking about text, which you can, you wanted us to sing the consonants, and you wanted a meaty text.
Well, that's a North of England pronunciation.
It is.
And I was taught to say singing.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And if I set G, I expect you to see G.
Yeah. But, most consonants in the alphabet can be sung. N, N, even J, B, Billy Bud, Billy Bud, and it's something that we don't think about. But let's say a German singer is singing in English. The thing you notice is that they tend not to sing the consonants. So it will be Pillipud, Pillipud. There's a lot of English consonants that are sung, that are voiced. One says voiced. Even Billy Bud, that's exaggerating, but I'm just making the point.
Very good. So when you encountered John singing your piece, was that the moment when you thought, right, I really got to write something bigger for this voice?
No.
No, that's not true. When I arrived at the point of writing these pieces, I thought that John was a contender, in a sense that it was one of the reasons why I chose the subject matter, because I could imagine his voice being part of the opera, and it's always been that when he's done my things, that I imagine that.
And aside from
the whole question of writing writing in a room and just writing music for anonymous people, like an orchestra in a way, you write in the start. You can think in the style. I've just been to Boston, and the Boston Orchestra plays in a particular way, but singers sing it's an instrument, and it has characteristics, and it was why I chose. One of the ingredients of why I made the choice is the presence of his voice.
And aside from John's very obvious Lancastrian consonants, what was it? Can you articulate what it was about the quality of his voice that suggested to you, the Green Knight?
Come on, a few compliments.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have to. You don't need it from me.
No.
What about
the quality of the voice? What was it in the character of the voice that really drew
if I can, both characters, in a sense, of the Green Knight and the Minotaur, is they're sort of bigger than life. They transcend human thing, and he has that quality. Not only is it there naturally, but he can also put a layer onto that and it make it more like itself. And I don't know if John had not done them, I don't know whether I might have written something else. I don't know, I can't say. But I can't say more than it was a very necessary ingredient of why I chose this subject.
Because you'd heard me in quite a few, like Boris, I think, didn't you? And Gurnemans and various things. Yeah. Well, it's very nice to hear that.
And how far do you think these big Wagner roles shaped your thinking? In a sense, both of you. I mean, you were talking about Wotan clearly the other day. I mean, in what sense your knowledge and having heard Wotan being sung, how that shaped the way you thought about the Green Knight and about the Minotaur, and similarly for you, what do you bring from the many decades of singing those roles to the creation of these new roles?
Well, one thing comes to mind about Gawain, actually, when you were at the stage with David Harsant writing the text, and we talked. I think we met up and we looked over some pages of the text. And it was the beginning. It was Morgan Le Fay and it was Lady Haute Desert. And it was incredibly poetic and it was incredibly convoluted and mysterious and complex. And I sort of said, well, I hope it's not going to be like that when I come on. Do you remember that, Ben?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah.
I said,
of course, when I came on, it was absolutely straight as a die. I mean, it was a complete contrast. So that probably had nothing to do with that discussion. But
as they say, have faith.
Have faith, yes. And then another thing is that, to do with what you were saying, Jonathan, is that I'm basically a bass. I'm a bass voice. I always was right from the beginning. But around the Wotan time, towards the late 80s, I found that it was possible to sing a higher tessitura. I found it was possible to take the voice up into, we're only talking of semitones. I mean, basses sing top F sharps, and Wotan sings top F sharps. So we're not talking about a major change. We're talking about a tessitura. Tessitura means the general lie of the roll, and a bass roll tends to lie lower, and a baritone roll tends to lie higher, of course. And Wotan sort of is very incredibly dramatic role, which needs a bass quality, but it's got a higher tessitura. And in those years, I found that I could encompass that, because Barenboim rang me up and said, I want you to do Wotan, and so I did. And I could do it, and then I went on to do other similar roles, including things like Golo and the Flying Dutchman and so on. So when it came to Gawain, the Green Knight is a bass, declamatory bass part, like the Commendatore in Don Giovanni or something. But it's twinned with this character Bertilac in the second act. And I suggested that we could use this slightly higher tessitura that I had found I could encompass for that character, so it's like the same person but different. And that was a big success, wasn't it? I mean, you immediately took that on board.
Yeah. But you see, the funny thing about that is that it's not a question of looking at a chart and looking at the where the note is. It's a question of how you hear the whole piece, and where the sweet spots are. Do you understand the thing of the sweet spots?
Yes.
Every voice has a sweet spot, which is sort of That's the voice. The sweet spot
Yes,
is sort of about there.
Yes. I know, I understand. In the Minotaur, like in the Gawain, we discussed quite a lot of these things in Gawain. The Minotaur, I don't think it was just fitted absolutely like a glove. I don't think we even discussed anything about the vocal line. We discussed howling and what the bulls who roar.
We can talk about roaring. That if you like.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll come on to the howling and the roaring in a moment. I just want to go back a moment. This is really interesting, that you hear a voice, you get a sense of the whole voice and the whole piece. Now, could you just explain, I think people would be interested to hear how this sort of dialogue took place? So that there was clearly, in the process of creating Gawain, there was a conversation between the two of you.
Well, I think the conversation was mainly in terms of sheets of music coming through the post and me singing them. And then when we next met up, I might say, this is fantastic, that's a bit low, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure if I can manage this, and so on. Just general, it's very practical, isn't it?
Let me ask you a question, John. Is there a role that you play that is not, in some sense, is not quite right?
Not quite right for my voice?
Yeah.
Yes, there is. Well, I would say, the Flying Dutchman...
I don't suppose we would notice, but I'm just wondering how psychologically it might be for a singer to sing something which is not,
Yeah, well, I've sung two roles which are basically too high for my voice. One is the Flying Dutchman, and one is Balstrode in Peter Grimes. And I'm very proud of those performances I did. They were bloody good, if I dare say so, and they've been recorded and so on. But I had to pretend I was a tenor for 3 months in each case. It was not actually my natural Fach, as one says, auf Deutsch. And so, it's good to stretch yourself, of course, to a particular point, but I succeeded in stretching myself slightly beyond the possible in those cases.
But you don't feel that with the Green Knight, even though Harry was, as it were, in certain places very clear, exploiting the upper end of your...
No, not the Green Knight and the Minotaur are absolutely fit like a glove. As I've said, the Green Knight, bass, Bertilac, bass baritone, and the Minotaur, a beautiful lyrical bass, like a basso cantante. It's just absolutely. Perhaps should I sing now a bit of the Green Knight?
I think that would be a wonderful. I think it would be a wonderful idea. Perhaps we should just put it in context. So, which part of the you're going to sing from the first act of the opera?
Should I just stand up and Ben? Could you join us, please? Ben is going to attempt to boldly compress the 85-piece orchestra. Can I say something before you do it? What I can't bear is the orchestral reductions of my music. It bears no resemblance and it makes me wince, but never mind. But the voice is right, so yeah.
We'll lower the lights so we can't see you wincing. It's fine.
So this is the Green Knight comes to the court of King Arthur, and he says, "I've got a challenge. One of you chop my head off, and in a year's time, come to my place, and I will chop your head off." And Gawain replies, takes up the challenge. He chops off the head of the Green Knight, and the body of the Green Knight picks up his own head, and the head sings. My title is Knight of the Green Chapel. In 1 year and a day, look for me there.
like a hill than a house, more like a cave than a hill, more like a tomb than a cave. Your image trapped in their eyes, creatures of the night taking your scent, madmen who know only one word. Your ride north, find the place, and find me there. The bargain struck, you carry it closer than your shadow. Find the place, ride north.
Thank you very much, and it's so exciting to hear that again. It's the second dramatic moment in the piece, isn't it? The first is your arrival.
Yes.
And then we have this... well, would you describe it as an aria? Do you think of it as an aria?
What, this?
Yes.
I suppose it is the nearest to an aria that we get in that piece. Mm-hmm. Of course, normally it's sung... Well, in Covent Garden it was sung off stage, because, of course, the head wasn't my head.
There is one anecdote which I'm fascinated with, if I can just, as they say, share it with you, is how did you cut his head off? And a lot of people have said, how did you do it? And nobody knew what had happened. And what happened is...
You're not going to give it away, Harry.
What?
You're not going to give it away.
Well, we're not going to see it, are you? Because I'm interested in why. You don't know how it was done. That's the point. And the point being, it's about time. It's about time in music that exists in a linear way. But what happens is there's a big knock on the big doors, bum bum, and he comes in. And then the point is the axe is raised on his head, and it comes down at that time, blackout, and immediately in the blackout there's a knock on the door again, and he comes in again, but it's not him actually, it's a smaller person that you could do with that. Yeah, but nobody well, not saying that nobody knew, but a lot of people do. And and the question of memory, they don't sort of say, "Oh, I know how you did it. I didn't," or "Why did they come in twice?" Nobody's ever said that to me.
Well, it was a little bit. There was a little bit more to it in that the axe is coming down, blackout, knock on the door, in comes the false Green Knight, but then rapidly is replayed the previous scene.
Yeah.
It takes perhaps 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So that the Green Knight goes through everything that I had done in the previous quarter of an hour. This double does everything that I have done in 2 minutes, and it's sort of as if the whole scene has been speeded up on fast forward, and then the axe comes down and chops his head off, and nobody seems. Everybody says, "Well, how did they do that?"
But this story is wonderful because I think what it reveals with both of our guests here is that sense of drama which is crucial to these pieces. And I had the privilege of being at the dress rehearsal when Gawain was given its semi-staged production last year as part of Harry's 80th birthday celebrations. And what for me was very interesting is that Harry was sat there all the way through, didn't say a single thing about the music. But the moment we had the knock on the door, he stood up and said, "Oh, hang on a minute, that's come in too soon. That's fraction too soon." Well, and that was what was important to you. And clearly, I mean, it's important to you as well, John. It's not just that, you've got this marvellous voice which is right for the role, but it's that sense of the timing of the dramatic moment.
Well, you could imagine if the brass all came in a beat too late, you would in dramatically in the wrong place. And in writing music, you hear time. I hear it in time, and it's what I deal in. And the whole question of it, this is by way, I'll say it very quickly, but it's one thing that since that time I've been exploiting the whole idea of repetition in music and repeats, what repeats mean. Anyway, but it's meant a lot to me there. Anyway.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is why I'm here in Cambridge, in that, as I said at the very beginning of the week, I'm not an academic, even though I got a 2-1 at Manchester in engineering in 1967. I'm not an academic. I'm here because I'm a practitioner. I feel as if I'm a sort of craftsman. I've been treading the boards for 40-odd years. I'm an opera singer. I'm a singing actor. I'm a physical performer. And the reason I'm here in Cambridge is part of a sort of cross-fertilization idea, isn't it? That academics and practitioners should hear each other. And so all this physical stuff to do with heads being chopped off and doors banging, the stage is a very dirty place, it's a very sweaty place, it's a noisy place. It's when I first went on the stage, I was amazed at the physical sort of, that it's hard to, it is not a clinical environment like a concert hall. It's not or chamber music in a recital room. It's very much the opposite. It's very much theatre, and you love theatre, Harry, as much as I do.
We are going to need to move on to the Minotaur, but I think one question that I think people may well be interested in, I mean, when you're preparing, let's say, a role like Wotan, there's a long tradition there, there's a heritage on which you can draw. When you're creating a new role, like the Green Knight or like the Minotaur, can you just say something about, the mental process, as it were?
Well, what I would say very strongly is that it's exactly the same, except that you can talk to the composer, and you can work together with the composer, of course. But if I'm learning Wotan, of course I listen to Hans Hotter. I listen to all, the great. I said this the other day, but only listen once to Hans Hotter, one recording once. And I mentioned a man called Ferdinand Franz, a great Wotan, who I loved. Just listen once to his Furtwängler 1951 Rome recording. Do you know what I mean? Because you are, essentially, as a singer, you have to have the confidence to create your performance from the notes on the page. The composer has this image, this imagination, it all ends up as dots on the page, and my craft is to bring those dots to life. I know this has often been said, and it sounds a bit pretentious, but it's absolutely true. And one has to have an integrity about that. One has to have a skill of, that we want attention to the precision of those notes, but also an imagination as to why they were written like that in the first place.
But then otherwise you get stuck in a sort of tradition of doing it in somebody else's
Yes.
way.
Exactly. And the one great thing you have, just like your own voice is your own unique instrument, your response to those dots is your own unique response. No other singer will respond as you yourself do to it.
And I suppose that the voice being a physical thing, singers find way around of finding the way they sing it in different ways, because the actual instrument is not the same.
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Each individual.
Yeah.
But when the composer is there in the auditorium and I'm rehearsing, of course I'm talking to you every tea
Yeah.
break
Oh,
about
yeah. Oh, yeah.
this, and it's a regular sort of discourse the whole time. But
We better move on to Minotaur, which is the reason
Yes.
we're here. So we spool forward about a decade and a half. But in many ways, the Minotaur follows on from Gawain. There are very similar concerns being played out in these two pieces.
And in this case, it's exactly the same reason. One of the reasons that I chose it was that I thought that John could sing it. And it was a decision that contributed to my decision of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a Wagnerian connection. Like this week, it was Wotan on Wednesday, and now we're talking about your music. And I did the song recital on Monday, and I was thinking, is there any link to your music, Shostakovich and Britten and Wolf?
Shostakovich, I hope not.
No, that's... Well, my conclusion was... Well, I'm not going to reply to that. But my conclusion was that the only very, very tenuous connection is possibly with Wolf, I felt. But of course, with Wotan, with Wagner, there's a strong connection. I mean, the Minotaur is sort of an amfortas coupled with a Hagen in feeling. And when I'm on the stage waiting to sing one of my dreams, there's this Passacaglia, I think. Passacaglia, which you could be Hagen in Götterdämmerung. You're very much in the same world. And you're in the world of the conscious and the unconscious. Wotan's natural side having gone, and the Minotaur being half beast and half man. It's very much the same, as well as the mythology, of course. So...
Yeah, very close. Yeah. But also these two roles, the Green Knight and Bertilac, which, as it were, are showing us two different sides of the same whole. And in the Minotaur, we have the same thing. We have the beast who can only grunt and moan and shout. And then we have the creature who dreams, and we see, as it were, the human side of the creature. And it's as it were, looking at the opposition and trying to find some kind of connection between those two halves, which I suppose is not so far removed from
Can we talk about the grunts?
Let's talk about
I've got a video of the grunts.
Yeah. Shall we see some grunting?
I mean,
would you like to see some grunting?
Well, no. The point being is that I didn't want him to invent an animal noise. I wanted it to be, even if it ended up being an animal noise, I wanted it to be derived from a dramatic context and a word. Even if the word was only in his head, and say the word was anger, or whatever. So he sort of, I think, and that was important. It has a dramatic impetus from the thing, and it's one thing I learned at working in the theatre. That it has to, whatever you do, it has to be derived from a dramatic center and sense, some sort of motivation of the word. I mean, if I said make a dark noise and think sadness, rather than just make a dark noise, then it's imbued with sadness as well. So it's a motivation psychologically in the head. That's my thinking about it. Anyway, end of grunts.
We can see this. Do you just want to set it up for us, John? So.
Yes, so this clip is the first appearance of the Minotaur as a beast. My first contact with the discussions about the Minotaur were all about how the Minotaur was going to be represented. Because Harry was writing the Minotaur as a beast, but he was writing him as a man who dreams fluently. His dreams are fluent. He's functioning as a man when he's dreaming, mentally. And there's also Minotaur 2, which is a sort of another Minotaur commenting cynically, possibly, on the main Minotaur. So it was quite complex. And
but it would be impossible to write an opera about the Minotaur if he couldn't sing words. And and otherwise it would be a grunting opera.
Yeah.
And so that was the clever invention of David's.
Wonderful.
This is David Harsent.
That he in his dreams. Also with his sister as well, isn't it?
The dreams are with his sister. But also when he's dying, he can speak fluently when he's dying, and he speaks fluently in his dreams. But now, in this clip, we see him goring and raping, actually.
But in the end, I think we did it as well. Is at the ending, he becomes coherent.
Yes.
So as he dies, he becomes coherent. That was what was in mind.
Could we see the first clip, Tim, please? Oh, God.
Too quiet. Are we doing any more like that? No, I mean, can you turn it up a bit when you do it again?
Yeah, the sound was a bit low,
Yeah.
Tim. A bit more sound.
Again, I mean, that's the most extraordinary dramatic moment in the theatre. I mean, it's very uncomfortable for a member of the audience, apart from anything else. I mean, it's all about body, it's visceral. I mean, even when they're singing English, you on purpose, you can't hear the words. It's very violent. The music is highly rhythmicized, but of course, it's setting something up that's going to be contrasted with what we're going to hear.
Yes, I was. I was very pleased with the way I was after the rape there. Because you saw a beast who is behaving just as he has to behave. It's sort of in his DNA. It's what he does. And
the dog bites,
Yeah.
But it's also this extraordinary ritualistic moment. I mean, to the extent that we had drummers on the stage as well, performed in this arena. As we said before, you're not singing words; you're just vocalizing. How do you prepare that? How do you think about? I mean, it's very difficult to sustain the intensity of that, apart from anything else through that.
Yes, and there's. There were two big physical challenges of the Minotaur. One was getting the head right. Do you remember we had incredible trouble? And that's a brilliant head. It's made of wire. It's made of a sort of network of wire. So, because, I have to see like an actor, and I have to see the conductor. I have to be heard. There's no microphones, in the opera house. I have to hear the orchestra. So we started off with a sort of cloth head thing, as you might, as Bottom might have, as a donkey. And of course, it's totally impracticable. I couldn't hear, I couldn't be heard, and so on. And then we got this chap from Wales who worked in iron, steel and metal, and he made that from wire and metal gauze. So I can sing in it freely. I can be heard. I can hear everything. It's completely wonderful. And in the snout of it, there's a light, so that you probably see later when I'm fluent and when I can speak and coherent, the light comes on, so you can see a man's face inside the bull's head.
It demonstrates the duality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the other thing, of course, is all the work with Philippe. Do you remember Philippe? So I've never played an animal before, I don't think. So just sort of, there's sort of lightness on the feet, but he always sort of leading with the head and the eye. But also it's the timing that animals, just like your cat at home, will just be alert and immobile, and will just be listening and watching, and then suddenly decide to move.
And was this
and so there's all that to be discovered, you see.
Was this physicality in your mind, Harry? I mean, I know your interest in Picasso and his bulls and minotaurs and so on goes back a long way. I mean, were these the very physicality of the character of the Minotaur must have been in your mind even when you were writing the piece?
Well, it has to be one-to-one. It has to be. I mean, you couldn't really hear the orchestra too much there, but it's a highly, and it's not just chaos either. It's a highly formal piece of music as well, and which.
Well, and then we have this transition. We have these beautiful toccatas, which are entirely orchestral, much more linear. I mean, that was much more rhythmic. You get these long, slow lines that, as it were, move us from one state of the Minotaur to the other. It's absolute stasis.
It's stasis.
It's static, completely static. And in the production, it was represented by the slow movement of waves.
But the Minotaur's situation is static, isn't it? It's a character, whereas somebody like Theseus, this bright young baritone comes on with a task and he makes decisions and he's like a fairly normal theatrical character and he does the job and he goes away. The Minotaur's stuck. He's in a prison. Nothing changes. And then he dies. It's life's grim and then you die. It's a little bit... I'm right, aren't I?
Yeah, sure.
So maybe we should hear the you're going to sing them. Now when he uses words, because he's dreaming. When he's dreaming, he can use words and examines himself.
Yes, Ben. So this is the first beginning of the first dream from the Minotaur. And these are the first bits of paper that came through the post about 8 years ago. Silver. I don't think there's anything more to say. I think let's just hear it.
Light labyrinth. In dreams I seem to speak like any man. I say my name, I tell my story, I howl the words, I speak the words, I curse, I call a curse on love, on love's dark ways. Love is lost to you. They bring me these gifts, these innocents. It seems to me they are chosen for their beauty. When I see them, I have to spoil them. These women, too beautiful to live. Their perfect bodies, their pale, soft skin. They're my image in their eyes. Asterius, hideous, reflected in their eyes. I pluck out their eyes, of course. I rip their skin, of course. I foul their bodies, of course. They bring me these gifts of blood. Blood calls for blood. Who is that dark in the mirror beside you? No one. A shadow. No one. A shadow in the mirror beside you. No one. Dark in the mirror. Myself. Oh, something like myself. Oh, someone standing apart to watch. Or else some lost creature from the world of light.
Could I just say that Minotaur 2, who keeps speaking and interrupting there, of course on the stage I don't normally do that part. They actually overlap. It's not possible actually to do two parts as I just did because it's a slight compromise. Just to explain that.
It's sung in front of a mirror, so in a sense
Yes.
you're looking at your reflection, and it's your reflection speaking back to you.
Well, it's a sort of, not quite my reflection is there, but there's another Minotaur there. There's another Minotaur pre-recorded, and my voice as the second Minotaur is pre-recorded. There's also Ariadne there, and there's also a shadow. The shadow I'm referring to is Theseus. Who is that other image there in the mirror, in the labyrinth? It's Theseus, who it will, of course, be my destroyer.
So who is the Minotaur?
Me.
Well, I wondered whether he might.
Well, we are 90 whatever the genetic proportion is between us and apes, are we about 98% DNA common with gorillas or something like that? And one, I think I'm roughly in the right area here. A couple of percent Homo sapiens and 98% ape, basic, something like that. So it's an expression of the human condition, isn't it?
But when Harry says me, I mean, in a sense, now I'm going to be slightly naughty here, Harry, but you've only ever written one role. I mean, he keeps appearing in all sorts of different guises. But, poor old Mr. Punch, he's a terrible melancholic.
Yeah.
The same with the Minotaur and Orpheus, weeping his way across,
I've just done it again.
You've just done it again.
As well. Never mind.
So, I don't know whether you see something of, as it were, Harry's, if you like, melancholic sensibility in this role, and how you respond to that.
Well, it feels I have no difficulty identifying with it. It feels very human. It feels like an expression of the human condition, doesn't it? Now, why? Why does it feel like that is another question. I think it probably boils down to the 98% animal genes, actually. The psychologists say, don't they, we do what we want to do, basically, and then the 2% of our Homo sapiens intellectuality finds very clever hypocritical reasons to explain why we've done what we're doing. Yeah. But the animal is profoundly... we are basically animals. In a word, we are...
Yeah.
So in this moment, we saw this extraordinary scene when you first arrived, which is rhythmic, which is essentially untexted, which is absolutely animalistic. Yeah. And then we move to this music, which is completely different, which is, and people say there are no tunes in recent music. Well, I dare them to say that, having heard you sing that.
Absolutely beautiful.
There's a complete, this sense of line and so on.
It's wonderful.
But what is so also extraordinary is that relationship between those lines and the text, which is where we began, with the text in Punch
Well,
and
it's the
Judy.
duality again, isn't it? I mean, that's his human side. I mean, it's very obvious that, I hope, yeah.
And isn't it true that the bestiality you've made as bestial as possible, and the human side you've made as beautiful as possible? I mean, he sings so beautiful in his dreams.
That's very good.
Because he's so horrible during the day, isn't it? I mean, the Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, yeah.
And is that true?
Well, I don't think. I think it's the animal thing. You see, I don't think animals. They're not. Lions are not sinning when they're killed.
No,
Yeah.
And that's very clear in David's text.
Yeah.
In David's text, the Minotaur is always saying, the animal does these things, but the animal is innocent. But it's the side of the man which is guilty in these ethical, moral, dilemmas.
Now, you're probably not going to want to answer this question, Harry. I've tried it on you before, but I'll try again anyway. Which is, when David Harrison sends you the text, it lands on your doormat, you open up the envelope and you think, right, here's this moment, here's the first dream. How do you conceptualize that? I mean, you've simply got a text. Where do you go from there?
When there's a subject matter which is very clear and its narrative is very clear, and that it has these, in the case of this piece, it's very in these two parts. I can see. I just sort of feel I have a way of doing it, but I cannot comment on it until I have started to do some work, and then in everything I've done with him, with David Harrison, is I have to start and make some music, as it were, and then once I have a context to make comments on, and so I'm not a musical architect. I write music in what you might call a permanent state of exposition. you know. And once there is a context, I can then think of ways to go which I could never have conceived in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so,
and it's like taking a walk. If you take a walk in a woodland, you might think, you know, where am I going? I know where I want to end, but the decisions of how I get there are open to my eyes and the way I see. So I can think, well, maybe I should go there. Maybe you can't go two ways. You know, and so it's a question of having. And as the context develops, then I can make comments about the text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then what I say to him more than anything, make it more like itself. It's not dark enough. Make it darker. It's not sad enough. Make it sadder, because it's being expressed in music, you know. And you can't simply say sadness over half a sentence. If it's like that piece, it's got to be an extended thing. So it existed in the first place with not very much. And I said, no, come on. It is actually telling something within the state of music. And it's a musical expression as well as a dramatic, textual.
Music is an incredibly better medium for communicating emotion, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it pierces the heart very directly, whereas text.
I think it's quite direct, the piece, in a way, and the subtleties are in the detail. You know, it's like you can see beneath the ocean, and you can see the boat on the top, and you can see, you know, everything that's underneath. I think in Gawain, it's what's in the soil underneath, in a way, that is like the textures of the earth and the stones. This is something about what is under the sea.
And this just rides on the sea.
And the dramatic thing sits on the top of it.
But those words of David, for a singer, are heaven sent. I mean, they're wonderful words to sing. They're wonderful phrases, wonderful sentences. It's a joy to sing those.
And you've worked with Harrison a lot. I mean, you've got through a fair number of librettists, but you since Gawain, you've returned on the current piece that you just finished.
Yeah.
So what is it about, I mean, John's given his view, what is it about the quality of his texts that
he does what I want. And he does what I want, but at the same time he does it himself. It's not compromise. I wrote a song cycle, and I dismissed 3 lots. I said, no, it's not what I want. And then I did another set of poems. I said, no, it's not what I want. I mean, I expressed to me what I wanted. I said, I want it like the Winterizer, you know? And we eventually got there, and he said, this is the last bit, I'll never do it. I can't never do it again. He said, I haven't got it. If you don't like this, you can find somebody else, which is fair. But in the end, he gave me something that I wanted. The longest part in Parsifal, of course, is Gurumans, and the longest part in the Minotaur is Ariadne. Yeah. And it struck me recently that Ariadne and Gurumans are quite similarly written roles. They are sort of guardians of the piece, and they're explaining what has happened and what may happen, and they express what is happening. You're right.
They're sort of, aren't they? She is sort of a conduit with the public, just as Gurumans is a sort of, the story is happening and Gurumans is tangentially involved. He's not really involved. You could almost play the story without Gurumans, but he's on stage most of the time. He sings most of the time about what is happening, and Ariadne is a bit. With David's
that's active.
text.
It's one of the functions of chorus in Greek theatre. They're telling you what is happening, and why it is happening.
I'm conscious of the time, which is flying by, and we must leave just a little time for members of the audience to ask some questions. But we have one more scene to view,
Yes.
which is the very end of the opera when he dies.
Exactly. I think, and as we've said, he becomes coherent and lucid in his last minutes.
Yeah.
So I think we can go. Sorry.
I had a model, which is Mussorgsky, for the end. I wanted it. I wish I'd done it about 3 times longer. I think it was longer, but anyway, I don't know why we composers like Mussorgsky and not Rachmaninoff and Tchaikovsky. You have to answer those questions yourself.
Actually, the last 3 or 4 minutes, the conductor is conducting in one tempo, and me and a few instruments are in another tempo. So it's one time when I have to ignore the conductor and sing at a different tempo when we meet at certain landmarks, which was a new experience for me, I must say. But it's...
So you're patting your head, you're rubbing your tummy, and you've got your bull's mask on at the same time. No,
So could we hear this, Tim, please? And could we have more sound this time, please? Was it long enough?
No.
The death scene? No.
Well,
Or perhaps next time you'll...
I've got another idea for an opera for you might like.
That was going to be my last question, actually.
All right, well, go on, ask it.
What next?
Well, I don't know. But if you know anybody with a lot of money, and what I'd like to do a setting of Jack and the Beanstalk. End of... Well,
Why?
well
Why
he'd
not?
be great, wouldn't he?
We have about 7 minutes left for questions. If anybody wants to pick up on Jack and the Beanstalk or anything else that's been said over the last hour and a quarter, please feel free. We've got some bright lights here, but if you could wave a hand around and just wait for a microphone to come to you, we'll take a question. Does anybody would like to put a question over here? Thank you.
Sorry. This is a question mainly for Harrison Birtwistle. I was just wondering whether, when you're coming up with your compositions...
Can't hear. Can you turn it up or something, please?
Speak louder.
Yeah.
Or speak louder.
When you're coming up with your compositions, do you have a kind of sense of the space in which it's going to be performed? Kind of almost architecturally speaking.
What was that?
Do you have a sense of the space in which the work is going to be performed when you're actually composing the opera?
Almost architectural.
Almost kind of in 3 dimensions.
Well, you talk about the building.
The building,
I mean,
stage...
the space that you do.
set.
The sense of the stage,
I
the
think the
space
set.
in
Yeah,
which it will take
absolutely. I had in my garden, I sent out for the measurements of the Royal Opera House, and when I lived in France, because I was interested to know how many times what the tempo should be to go around it once. So that did.
Was that for the seasons?
Yeah.
The
This
seasons
is
in Galway.
Yeah. Yes. Mhm. So yes, I think is the answer. On the
I've
other
got a
side-
very clear idea of everything about the way it looks, and because it's one of the reasons why I do it, and then it's up to the interpretation of the idea, and.
I mean, there was a recent new production of Gawain in Salzburg. Yes.
I smite thee. It was done in Salzburg. He did it in Salzburg. There are 2 things in my life. One, I used to be a clarinetist, and at one point, I used to feel happy, and I said, why are you feeling happy? And I thought, oh, that's I know why, because you've given up playing the clarinet. Yeah. And so I have a sadness now, rather, and it's this production. We won't go into it, but it was the worst production, not of Gawain, but of any opera that has ever been done. And it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy because it cost many, many thousands of pounds, millions maybe, and it was if you could have picked the best place in the world to have done it, you could have done it there, and that's the tragedy. So now I sometimes feel sad, and I think, what is it? Oh, I know. It's that production of Gawain.
Yeah, it was in the Felsenreitschule in Salzburg, with green moss hanging on the rocks behind. So, as you say,
But it's very long. You could have done wonderful journeys and things.
Yes.
It could have been the most magical opera ever. And unfortunately, it was the worst opera ever.
Right, okay, moving swiftly
yes.
on. We have a question over
Well,
here.
I warned you, Harry, but
Yeah, well, I know, but I didn't know
about
that-
a month before I was phoning you up saying,
I do.
this could be...
It was. I can't. Let's not talk about it.
No,
We are being filmed, and this will go on the web shortly. So.
Good. Well, I don't mind.
A bit of a singer's question, this. Are there any particular techniques that you use for memorizing the vocal part or learning the vocal part and perhaps learning the accompanying part, given perhaps that the piano reduction is not a good representation of the orchestral part? I mean, how do you approach it? Are there any differences between learning these roles of the Minotaur and Gawain as opposed to, let's say, learning Wotan?
well, in principle, I would say not really. I mean, the learning process for a singer. I mean, I was having reference to scores there because I've never done the Minotaur 2, you see, so that was a slight concern. And the piano sounds very different from the orchestra, so I was referring occasionally to it there. But you know, you learn a part. You learn the tune of you learn your own tune in a way. You learn the intervals, you learn the rhythms, you learn the text. By learning, I mean you sing it. You sing it from beginning to end one day, and then you sing it from beginning to end the next day, and you learn those intervals, and so that your voice really gets into it, and your voice feels at home in it. And then you go to a coach, and the coach plays the piano reduction, and you're singing your tune, as it were. It might be a complex tune, but it's a tune just the same as a tune in Bellini or Wagner. It's the line that I'm singing, and so I'm using that text and I'm expressing things in that line, and I'm using the musical feeling of those intervals and so on. And then the orchestra come, which when it's a new piece is a big shock because nobody has ever heard it. Possibly in the mind of the composer, but we are there wondering what the piece is going to sound like. And you've got 2 weeks in which to assimilate that sound before the first night. You know what I mean? So there's a lot, that's a major thing with a new work, because with an existing work, of course, you know what the orchestra is going to sound like.
But what was extraordinary watching you singing that first dream sequence, I mean, you haven't sung it on, since the revival, which is quite a few years ago, and yet it's still in your blood.
All there,
you
yes.
hardly looked at the score.
Yes, well, there are no. You mentioned, are there any sort of tricks to learning? And there aren't. I don't think. You sing it and you study it. If it's in a foreign language, you translate the text. You study the text. You study the pronunciation. You may work with a Hungarian coach if it's in Hungarian, and so on. And and then you find that you're singing it in the shower. You find that it's sinking in. You find that it's just going into your unconscious. You just find unconsciously that you're memorizing it. And I suppose if you've done it for 40-odd years, your brain actually adapts to that. Your brain actually gets used to soaking up information and holding on to it. So more than that, I cannot really say.
So you heard it here. Sir John Tomlinson sings Birtwistle in the shower.
Yeah.
Sadly, our time is up, so please join with me in thanking Sir Harrison Birtwistle and Sir John Tomlinson and Ben Coppo for their contributions
thank you, Ben.
to this afternoon.